Most Americans probably weren't aware that we are on the verge of a massive regional war.
All ships, attention all ships. This is Sepah Navy, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy.
In the Middle East, if not a third world war, we are. The largest movement of American military hardware is since 2003, the Iraq invasion, is now in or steaming toward the Persian Gulf off Iran, preparatory to what could be the aforementioned war. Now, most people, once again, probably didn't know this sense that it's inevitable. And that's kind of a psyop, actually, designed to make you think there's nothing you can do about it behind you. Maybe you've got great reasons to do it that they don't know about yet. Why would you do that? You can tell me you love me, but if you're encouraging me to commit suicide, you're probably lying.
The plans for the future are already made, and it's bad. Tucker Carlson. Something enormous is already in motion, unfolding quietly without debate and without your consent. While the public is distracted, the largest U.S. military buildup since Iraq moves into place. Narratives synchronize, and war shifts from a choice into a foregone conclusion. If this plan continues on its current path, the fallout will be devastating.
This is the largest buildup since the Iraq War, but Iran is not Iraq. It's much, much, much bigger and much more technologically advanced. Population of Iran is about 92 million. In 2003, almost exactly 23 years ago, when we rolled into Baghdad, the population of Iraq was 25 million. So Iran is more than 3 times bigger. The landmass of Iran is 6 times bigger. It's huge. It's a huge, pretty advanced country compared to Iraq.
Right now, as you are watching this, the United States military is moving more hardware into position than at any point since the Iraq invasion of 2003. Ships are steaming toward the Persian Gulf. Weapon systems are being pre-positioned. Forces are quietly shifting across the region. The American public has almost no idea this is happening, not because the information is classified, but because nobody is telling you. Think back to 2003 and how that war was sold. We know how it ended. The same people who sold that war are now preparing the next one, and this time they are not even trying to persuade you.
Recent polls on this question, are you for a war with Iran? It's about 1 in 5 Americans support it. The rest are probably asking, war with Iran? Why would we have a war with Iran? They said no idea. The president did address it last night in his State of the Union and at a press conference. And he said in public what he basically says in private, Trump being one of those rare public figures who's pretty much the same behind closed doors as he is on stage.
Here's the number that should stop you cold. Only 1 in 5 Americans supports a war with Iran, 20%. And most of the other 80% cannot even tell you exactly why this war would be fought. What is the reason? What is the goal? What does victory look like? Nobody has answered those questions publicly because the people driving this do not believe they owe you an answer. In a democracy, a war with 20% support is not a decision. It is a hijacking. The question is not whether the public will eventually get on board. The question is whether the people making this decision have any intention of asking you at all.
It's the same stuff. It's a little funnier in private, but basically he's not a different guy. He's the same guy. And he's been saying the same thing about Iran for a long time. Really 2 things. 1, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. He says it again and again. He really means it. That's not a talking point. It's completely sincere. And 2, I would prefer a negotiated settlement. I would prefer peace rather than war.
Now here is where it gets complicated. Tucker Carlson makes a point that most people in this conversation miss. Trump is not a warmonger. People who have spoken to him privately say he is the same in private as he is in public, which almost never happens in Washington. His position on Iran is consistent. Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That is non-negotiable for him. But he also genuinely prefers a deal over a war. He has said it publicly and he means it privately.
Line where we are right now at the end of February 2026 on this looming Iran war seems likely. Have all those aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, planes ready, missiles ready, but it's not certain because the president hasn't decided to do it. And you may not get that impression either from watching the news. There is this sense that it's inevitable. And that's kind of a psyop, actually, designed to make you think there's nothing you can do about it. No, Trump has not decided to do this. Again, seems likely. All the momentum is in that direction. But the president's the sole decider on this question. He's the commander-in-chief. And he's showing no obvious signs of enthusiasm.
So if Trump does not want this war, then who does? That is the real question, because the feeling of inevitability being pushed by the media right now is not accidental. It is engineered. It is designed to make you feel like the decision has already been made, like there is nothing left to debate, like the outcome is locked in. That feeling is a weapon. The moment the public believes a war is inevitable, they stop trying to stop it. The window to influence this is open, but it will not stay open.
He has signs of enthusiasm. And why would he? There are a lot of reasons not to do this. The first being the one just mentioned, which is most Americans don't want it. And though it's not a direct democracy, it's a form of democracy, and you probably shouldn't commit history-changing acts without the support of your people. And Trump feels that way. Iran is bad, yes. That's been the official U.S. position since 1979. Iran can have nukes. That's always been the president's position. And we would like some kind of settlement. The reason he's not eager to start this war is because he, in general, isn't eager to start wars, hasn't been anyway, but because this would be a particularly tough war.
Before anyone tells you this would be like Iraq, understand that Iran and Iraq are not even close to comparable. Iraq in 2003 had a population of around 25 million people. Iran today has 92 million. Iraq was roughly the size of California. Iran is 6 times larger. Iraq had almost no functioning air defense by the time the invasion began. Iran has Russian-supplied S-300 missile systems, domestically produced ballistic missiles, and has been actively preparing for a direct confrontation with the United States for over 40 years. They have wargamed this. They have built underground facilities specifically to survive the opening airstrikes.
It's a serious thing to start a war with a real country. Are we in a position to do that? Well, there's some debate about that. The U.S. military performs in a remarkable way under certain circumstances. But is the U.S. military right now ready for a prolonged conflict with a big country? No, it turns out. And these are facts taken from open source material that had been published. They're on the internet. You can look it up. None of this is classified. This is all out there. So low on certain kinds of munitions that were we to have even a brief but intense engagement with Iran, our military would not be ready for like 10 years to fight a real war.
Iraq collapsed in 3 weeks. Iran will not. Military planners anticipate years of sustained conflict, beginning across multiple countries through Hezbollah, the Houthis, and militias in Iraq and Syria. At the same time, the United States military is critically low on key munitions. Open source reporting confirms stockpiles have been drained by arming Ukraine and Israel, and the industrial capacity to replace them at scale does not exist.
Be much weakened by this because we don't have the stockpiles and we don't have the necessary industrial capacity to replace them quickly. So we are not in a position to have a lengthy engagement, and everyone at the Pentagon who's gaming this out understands that. And again, this has been reported publicly, though not necessarily in the New York Times or the Washington Post, at least not on the front page, but it's widely known. So it'd be a tough war. We're not in a great place.
A short, intense war with Iran could set American military readiness back by a decade. Think about what that means. The country that spends more on defense than the next 10 nations combined might not be able to sustain 2 major conflicts at once. And Pentagon planners have already identified Taiwan as the #1 near-peer threat requiring deterrence. If the United States burns its remaining munitions reserve in the Middle East, the deterrence posture against China does not weaken. It collapses. Someone is asking America to trade its ability to deter China in order to fight Iran. That trade should be explained to the American people. It has not been. Ask the people pushing hardest for this war what happens the day after the Iranian government falls. Ask them who governs the country. Ask them how you stabilize a nation of 92 million people who just watched their government get destroyed from the outside. The answer floating around in certain circles is Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah who was overthrown in 1979.
Potential downsides are absolutely real. Lots of things could happen. There are tens of thousands of Americans in the region, of course, in uniform and out. They could be hurt or killed. There's Israel, our ally, which is probably a little more vulnerable than we pretend it is to conventional attacks from ballistic missiles. Do the math on how many missiles Iran is believed to have versus how many anti-ballistic missiles Israel has, or we have to defend Israel. They could be in trouble.
Let that sink in for a moment. The Shah's regime is the reason the 1979 revolution happened in the first place. Bringing back the monarchy to a country that violently expelled it is not a post-war plan. The CIA helped install the Shah back in 1953. That intervention eventually produced the 1979 revolution, which produced the Islamic Republic, which produced everything that followed. The pattern of American regime change without viable replacement is not a theory. It is Libya after Gaddafi. It is Iraq after Saddam. It is Afghanistan twice. Remove the government, leave behind a power vacuum, watch something worse fill it. The people pushing this war do not have a plan for the day after because they do not need one. Their goal is removal. What comes after is someone else's problem.
And then there's a question of what happens to Iran. Like, does it fall apart? Does it disintegrate as a country? To be clear, as of tonight, there is no Israeli plan for what comes the day after we depose the Ayatollah, knock out the leadership of the country. What happens then? You're going to put in the former king's son or something? No one believes that's real. Will the country hang together with Pahlavi on the throne? Come on. No one is thinking this through because the people pushing this clearly don't care what happens after.
If this is not really about Iran's nuclear program, then what is it about? The JCPOA nuclear deal signed in 2015 was working. Inspectors verified compliance, and Iran was following it. It was not perfect, but it functioned. It was torn up in 2018 by choice, not mistake. The strategic reality is this: Iran is the last state-level military power in the Middle East capable of challenging Israeli dominance. Remove Iran, and Israel becomes the sole dominant military force in the region, the only nuclear armed power with no peer competitor. That is a permanent strategic shift. Judge intentions by effects, not stated motives. When outcomes consistently benefit one party and harm everyone else, the stated reason deserves scrutiny.
The point is to take out Iran as a coherent country, not to protect Israel, but in order to sweep Iran aside as a regional rival. Once Iran is gone, there's no question as to who controls the Middle East. It, of course, would be the only nuclear-armed power in the Middle East, Israel. Period. That's the reason. The problem is, if the country were to disintegrate, the downstream effects would be profound for everybody else. You would likely have refugee crises. Where would they go? Well, Europe. They haven't enough refugees. They might go right across the water to Qatar or UAE. Oh, that could be a huge, huge problem.
Now walk through what actually happens. If this war starts, Iran does not fight inside Iran. It targets US forces, Israeli cities, and Gulf energy infrastructure across the region on day one. Tens of thousands of American personnel become immediate targets as Iran launches ballistic missiles at US bases, Israel, and the Gulf. Iran already fired more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel in a single night in late 2024, and that was a limited strike. In a full war, missile volume would exceed interceptor capacity. Strikes on Saudi Aramco, UAE refineries, or Qatar's LNG terminals would have global effects. Qatar supplies roughly 30% of Europe's natural gas, and disrupting that supply would push Europe into economic crisis within weeks.
Let's say the United States attacks Iran. Maybe Iran just says, you're absolutely right. We're evil. We're rolling over. Everybody in charge is going to retire, commit ritual suicide. We're going to turn it over to some Western Democrat who brings in pro-choice politics and gay marriage. And we're cool. We're going to join NATO at that point. It's great. But what if Iran decides better to die on your feet than on your knees and just unleashes its conventional arsenal against American assets in the region, against Israel, and critically, against energy infrastructure in the Gulf?
The Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide choke point, carries 20% of the world's oil supply. If Iran closes it, or even threatens to close it, oil prices do not go up. They spike to levels that models project at $200 to $300 per barrel. That is $8 to $10 per gallon gasoline in America. That is supply chain breakdowns. That is food prices spiking because fertilizer is a natural gas derivative. That is a global recession with a real possibility of sliding into something worse. The people who would suffer most from this war are not in Tehran. They are in Detroit and Birmingham, and every small American city where a dollar already does not go as far as it did 2 years ago.
Wouldn't destroy the world forever, probably. but it would tank the economy in the meantime, for sure. And who would suffer most? Well, let's see. The Gulf states, Europe, and the United States. It's kind of weird that anybody, especially an ally, would push for a conflict that's almost guaranteed to hurt its so-called allies.
80% of Americans oppose this war. The military is not ready for it. There is no plan for what comes after. The economic costs would fall on ordinary Americans while the strategic benefits flow elsewhere. So who is actually making this decision? The hardware is already moving. The pre-positioning is already happening. The plans are already made. The only question left is whether you are part of them or simply paying for them. If this matters to you, share it, like the video, and don't forget to subscribe.